Hey everyone, welcome back to Hero and the Kid. And as always, I'm Will, and this interview is one of my biggest ones yet, and I can't believe he responded to the email I sent about 3 weeks ago. I sent an email if he wanted to come on and get interviewed by me, and then he said, that sounds cool. He didn't even say he wanted to do it yet, and I just went right to work getting ready for this, and I wasn't that nervous before today, and half an hour before this, my heart just started pounding, and I was like, man, I'm really doing this, but super happy to be doing this. Can't believe he's finally here. Let's just take a look at who's in the chat. So we got Two Brothers Comics, we got my mom, we got Comic Books NYC, and I want to give a huge thanks to Superior Heroes Reviews for moderating this chat. Thanks so much. We got Bueller, who just interviewed Shannon Mayer yesterday. Awesome job, Bueller. We have Perry, Jiggs, and John. Thanks for stopping by. And we have my grandfather. I want to thank you, everyone, for coming by and watching this. So, I know Ryan likes to have his people watching, smash the like button. But over here at Hero and the Kid, people like the damn video. So, with that being said, let's bring in the man of the hour, Mr. Ryan Stegman.
Hello.
How's it going? What's up?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Doing good. Just a little nervous.
Great intro.
Thanks. All right. So my first question today might be one of the most important questions of this interview. What are your thoughts on everyone saying Chip Zdarsky being the most excellent comic writer of all time? He has so many awards and shows them off all the time.
I just worry about his mental health when he gets run out of comics on a spit because, honestly, he tries his best, but he stinks. So I disagree with anybody that would say that. I think that obviously I've written now about 5 comic books, and I'd say I'm probably the best of all time. But that's just me.
That's
and Donnie's all right too.
So when I was doing my research getting ready for this, I was going through your podcast on the internet, and I saw you were absent on one of your podcast episodes, and Chip filled in. Saying that that's your most viewed episode, he proved to be consistently awesome, getting all these big names on the show and interviewing them. What do you think of him firing your producers?
Well, I mean, I felt bad for them at the time, but we got him back. That is definitely a sticking point for me that his episode was so popular. But he cheated. He got all of those famous people to come on the podcast. He had Mark Waid, he had, Ed Brisson, Kelly Thompson was on there, Matt Rosenberg. He exhausted his entire Rolodex in one episode, and I refused to do that to catch up to him.
So I was watching your live stream a week ago, I think it was, and you and Donnie were talking about how many 5-year-olds you could beat up before you got beat up. Mm-hmm. I'm 14. I do wrestling and powerlifting. How many me's could you beat up before you get severely hurt?
Wait, you said you do powerlifting?
Yes.
Well, 0. I can't beat you up then. Yeah, I'd lose.
Well, that answers that. We got Sam's Tangled Web in here. Thanks for stopping by. And we got Unruly Simeon and Comic Books NYC. Now I'm going to actually get into the main interview. Mm-hmm. So on your show the other day, which was your family live stream, you and your son were talking about Ben 10. Who is you and your son's favorite character?
If we had to pick one that we both love, I guess we'd say probably Deku from My Hero Academia. That I read that series, he reads that series. He's obsessed with manga. I do love manga, but I haven't read One Piece yet. So since we both read that one, I'll go with that. But he's obsessed. That's all he does is read manga. So
nice.
Mhm.
What do your kids think of your art? Do they understand the concept of it? And do you want your kids to become artists like you?
I do want them to become artists like me, but I try not to push it too hard. They like to draw, and I think someday they'll find like their true love of it. What was so? What was the question?
What do your kids think of your art? And do they
Oh,
understand
yeah.
the concept?
They seem to think that I am an inferior artist to any Japanese artist. That's for sure. Um, sometimes they'll get glimpses of, like they've come to a signing or two where like there's a huge line of people to meet me, and then I think they sort of get it then. But for the most part, they're just like completely unimpressed and kind of act like my drawing is a nuisance to their lives, like they'd rather me just be able to play video games with them all day. So yeah, they're not that impressed yet.
Okay.
I can't say what it was for recently, but I did something that'll be revealed at some point for a manga property. And as I was drawing it, I was showing my son, I was like, look, I'm doing this. And he goes, why would they ask you to do that? And I was like, oh my gosh.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Comic Books NYC says he treasures your original art pieces, and he wants to thank you for your great work.
Thank you. That's very nice to hear. And I'm curious as to which pieces he has.
Yeah, I wonder too. In your podcast on Thursday, Donny said something that taps onto my next question, but before I get into that, I want to focus on this. Donny said most people come up with good ideas and say someone should do that, but replace someone with I. That's what I did. I created this interview show. People poke fun at me and don't believe what I'm doing because I'm just a little kid, but I work really, really hard at this. I'm the one that reached out to you. People say that no one can say no to me, but they can. People chose not to. I got this interview myself, and with that being said, my next question is, so we were watching Joe Rogan with Kevin Hart, and Kevin said there are two types of people that get after it or people that sit back and stay content. My question to you is, what keeps you motivated or more driven to work all these hours you do?
First of all, I'd like to say that was pretty inspiring what you said at the top, and I think that's really cool. I just love to draw, and so it's not too difficult for me to continue drawing. I mean, it's more difficult for me to stop drawing than it is for me to continue, because it's what I've always done. It's my hobby. Like today I'm not working. I'm not drawing, and I had to announce that. I felt the need to announce that to my family so that I wouldn't actually go downstairs and start drawing. So I'd take the full day off. Yeah, so when you're doing something that you're passionate about, I feel like it's easy to keep going. And I mean, I'm looking at a drawing that I have to finish right to the left of me that I can't show you guys because I'd get in trouble. But it makes me want to work on it right now, and I have to take the time off.
Do you think this is what separates the really good artist from the excellent artist?
I think there definitely is something to that. I have seen many artists who, at one time or another, we were on the same level, or I was a little bit not as good as those artists, and some of them never improved, and they're still in the same place. I think that's kind of a hallmark of the work that I do, is that there's a constant trajectory of me improving what I'm doing, and I think that just comes out of pure desire to be better, and I don't know that everybody has that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Comic Books NYC has the cover to Spiderman and Venom Free Comic Book Day from last year. A page from Absolute Carnage, issue 4, the one where Eddie Brock carries Cap Shield.
Oh, so he's serious. Yeah, he's got some good stuff. That's cool.
He does this original art hour where he shows off all the original art on his show, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds neat.
Z Collect wants to know if you try to improve your art to impress your kids, or is it a lost cause?
It's a little bit of a lost cause until they start to like American comics. I think that they'll just never understand. Like, there's something in their heads that downplays what I'm doing. Like I've even had, so I did Spider-Man, I did Superior Spider-Man basically when my 9-year-old son was really young. He was probably, I don't know, 3 or something. And he didn't, it didn't register with him what I was doing then, obviously, because he was too little. But then I started doing Venom stuff, and then he was old enough to understand, and he was like, "Why don't you do Spider-Man?" And I was like, "Man, I already did it." But I don't even if I did Spider-Man, he'd probably still think it wasn't like the real Spider-Man or something. Who knows?
Well, hopefully you can inspire kids one day for that. But going back to the two types of people subject, my last question for that is, do you think it separates the people that break through and the ones that don't?
Absolutely, no question. There are people that will blame other people for their inability to make it or to improve, and once you see that, that they've got the wrong mindset. I mean, I've seen it over and over, and if I do every once in a while, I'll try to post something inspirational about working hard to make it in comics on Twitter, and inevitably you get the person in there who says, well, I've worked really hard and I can't get in, and it's all just a club that's set up to keep me out. And I'm like, well, you've lost the battle already if you believe that, because that's not true. There was nothing that was going to keep me out of here. And if you get, like, say, Olivier Coipel, he's one of the most amazing artists in the world. And if you were that good, then everybody would want to hire you. So your job is to just keep getting better. And there's no, it's not like if you were as good as Olivier, then they're going to say, well, but we made a deal that we're not going to hire this guy ever, just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I definitely think that that's the separator, is the people that take it upon themselves to get better and to improve versus those that, it's everybody else's fault.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I was younger, I was a golfer, and I was best in Connecticut for like a couple years. And then every day when I got home from school, I'd get home around 3. I'd do my homework, and then we'd go to the golf course, get there around like 3:30, and then we'd leave at 8. And then that was every single day. We'd probably have 1 week off a week, but I always wanted to just keep going, keep getting better. And there were days where I didn't want to do it, but I still went trying to push through. And same with my powerlifting that I do now. And going on to my next question is, being a dad that works on comic books and has 2 kids, does this make it their friends want to get into comic books?
Yeah, it is cool every once in a while. So, a friend, we have a friend down the street who is into it. So my son's friend's dad is into it. And so he kind of like, that's kind of neat. And then I did go into their school and do like a drawing thing for the entire school, and they thought that was really neat.
Cool.
Yeah, and sometimes his friends will come over and they're more interested in what I'm doing than my kids are, but I think my kids are just playing it cool. But their friends will come in and look at what I'm working on the drawing board. They probably have like secret information that they're not allowed to have. That's going to get me in trouble someday when they start posting on blogs and everything. But yeah, it's definitely, anytime that any of them show any interest, I try to nurture it in any way I can. So like I've given some of them, ink pens and printed out some of my pencils so they could ink them and stuff like that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a freshman in high school, and as far as I know, no one reads comic books that is in my school. And the reason why I'm doing this YouTube is trying to get more kids into this comic community, because I know comic books are kind of slowly fading away, and I want to keep getting people into it. That's the whole point I started the interviews and this channel. And I really want to get more people to comic books.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job. I to that note, when I was in high school, I was a lone wolf in my comic book love. I didn't have any friends that were doing it or that were into it. I had one friend who was kind of into it, but he always drove me nuts because he couldn't tell me who drew the issue of Spider-Man that he bought. He just would tell me about the story, and I was like, well, who drew it? And he'd say, oh, I don't know, like as though there wasn't an artist. But yeah, I always enjoyed kind of having my own little thing. But yeah, I definitely would have liked to have had some friends that were into it. And I think that that's the cool thing about the internet too, is that you can kind of build communities with shows like this and everything.
The immortal Biggie Shack wants to know what your favorite comic you own is.
I'll show you on camera right here. My wife just found this because we've been going through my old back issues. I have Amazing Spider-Man number 19.
Wow.
It's not worth that much. I mean, it's like $200 or $300. It's not in very good condition. But it's from my dad's collection. He gave me his comic book collection when I was younger. And this was in there, and you know, Spider-Man's my favorite character, and I've kind of carried this one around with me forever. And we just dug it up, so that was kind of good timing. But yeah, it's pretty neat.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, Biggie, you got your question answered. We have started collecting older comics. We were huge into collecting modern comics, and we picked up some early issues of Avengers and X-Men. Never come across any like early Spider-Man issues, but hoping someday we do.
Yeah.
But the next question I'm asking stays on the school subject. I asked this question to all my guests to see if it relates to me. But what was school like for you? How did you get treated when you got into comic books?
Well, like I said, I guess I sort of kept it a secret. I wasn't super secretive about it. I mean, I was very entrenched in the art classes at school, and you know, I was kind of known as an art kid or whatever. But nobody really said anything to the, you know, negative about it. I again, like, I don't know that I brought it up a lot. I just kind of was doing this thing on my own. So I think that you're lucky because comics are somewhat cool now because of the movies and all that.
Yeah.
For me, there wasn't much, you know, talk about them at the time. I do have one funny. I had a teacher who I never knew. You know, he was my history teacher. He was a great teacher. I never knew that he was into comic books while I was at school. And one time, a few years back, I was at a convention sitting there doing sketches, and he came up and he was like, he's like, yeah, how much for a sketch of Spider-Man? And I was like, you were my teacher. And he was like, what? And it turned out he's a huge Spider-Man fan. And so we got to talking. He didn't remember having me. He did find my records from his class later. But it turns out he was a huge comic book fan. And I said to him, well, why didn't you say something? We would have been like best friends in high school. And he said at the time he was like hiding it from everybody, but now he just wears it proudly, and we've become, you know, good friends over the years.
Yeah, that's what I do. I think I'm the only kid that wears superhero shirts to school. Everyone else wears like sports clothing. Mm-hmm. I know
you're the cool one. Trust me.
Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm. But I know soon that our buddy Bueller from Comics with Bueller is going to be interviewing Todd Mcfarlane pretty soon.
I've heard of him.
I'm waiting to see how that goes, and that'll be pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But staying on the topic of when you were younger, how did your family and friends react when you decided to be an artist for comics, or when you wanted to be an animator?
So my parents were always super duper supportive of my drawing aspirations. They just didn't know what I was going to do with it. My dad tried to talk me into going to school for computer animation, and I didn't really want to do that. I knew that I just wanted to make comic books. But so it was about when I was 15 that I got really into like Spawn and all that stuff. And I just right away, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And at the time, I think I was a little bit rudderless. And I think they were a little concerned about like what I was going to do with my life. I mean, I was doing okay in school. You know, I was getting good enough grades. I got into Michigan State and everything, but I didn't seem to have like a real aim. And so as soon as I started showing interest in the comic book thing, they just went for it. And my parents were, you know, not always, they didn't, you know, they weren't very loose with their money, but they did help me to buy the anatomy books that I needed and everything. So that let me know that they actually like were supporting and they really believed in me. And my friends, I think that maybe they just thought it was like, you know, I think they all knew that I could draw, but they probably just thought it was some sort of passing fancy. But you know, I stuck with it, and I never wavered from that age that that's what I was going to do. I mean, I have other friends who in college talk about when I went to Michigan State and I got an English degree. But they said in my senior year, all of a sudden I got really serious, and they said that it went from like me hanging out with everybody all the time and being around to me being in my room and not coming out anymore. And I was drawing all the time to get prepared for when I graduated so that I could try to get some work.
Whatever I try and do, like if I want to, whatever I want to try and do or do something, my parents are always there for me and my little brother. They're so supportive, and they just want to see us grow. And I want to just say thank you so much to them. It does mean a lot. But I have
For sure.
I have some pictures from comics that I would like to show, or well, you did these, so you probably already know. But these have been really cool. I just read this one today to refresh. Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows.
Oh yeah,
it is awesome.
I loved that series. That was a lot of fun.
Now I was looking at this and I see the T-Rex, and then I'm reading the newest issue of Venom, and then
Yep.
So is there a reason why you kept the T-Rex in there or anything?
I love dinosaurs.
Yeah.
You know, I've always loved dinosaurs. I think that it's a funny thing. There is something strange. A lot of I mean, maybe it's just all people, but so many comic book artists that you talk to had a phase where they were obsessed with dinosaurs as kids. I don't know if it's that we liked to, if part of it was that we all were drawing dinosaurs as kids, or what the deal is, but like not just like, you know, sort of into dinosaurs. Like I used to be able to name all of the dinosaurs and spell their names and all that stuff. So it's like a real obsession.
That's like my brother, but with sharks.
Yeah, there you go. My kids with sharks, my kids with sea life. They're both obsessed with sea animals.
The Immortal Biggie Shack says that Venom is his favorite run for sure.
Thank you.
Cool. But my next question is, did you ever get the chance to become an animator like you wanted, or do you still have dreams of doing it?
I don't have any. If anything, I would like to see the process. But I love the autonomy of drawing comic books. I love the fact that there's so few. A comic book requires so few people to make it. So there's such singular vision on it, and I think that's kind of the magic of it. And I think animation, you end up working on a part of something, which would be cool, but it's not yours. Like with a comic book, I could, well, you know, like we do on my YouTube show, where Donny Cates and I are creating a new comic book series. Like all that took is two people sitting around talking, and now that thing can be made. So yeah, I much prefer the way that comic books are made. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, comic books are really cool. How did you get into the comic industry, and what were you doing before comics?
So I finished college, moved back in with my parents. They were thrilled. It took me, I started doing, I got a job in a stock room at Crate and Barrel. And then, you know, I would work, I don't know, like 20 to 30 hours a week. And then I would draw the rest of the time. And I got a job drawing within like a year. But so I was like 22, and it was paid like basically, if I did the math, I know I did the math, and I was getting like $2 an hour to draw comics, and then it really wasn't enough to live on. But at the time, I started dating my wife, and she kind of, saved me from my parents' house, and she and I moved in, and I still wasn't making very much money. And then, really, so about age 22, I did Midnight Kiss, and then I parlayed that into this book called Magician Apprentice, which was a novel adaptation that was being published by this company called the Depault Brothers. But when I started working on it, Marvel bought that company. So suddenly I had Marvel editors, which was, a huge stroke of luck. And Marvel kind of kept me afloat. That it wasn't like all of Marvel was into my stuff. It was one editor who saw how passionate I was and how much I wanted to improve, and so he kept me working. And really, like, I wouldn't say that I was really making a living. Like, I couldn't have paid my own rent, I don't think, until I was 27 years old. But it was worth it. All the time that I spent trying to make it, and yeah.
Well, it's awesome to see you here now doing these awesome comic books.
Thank you.
What was your big break? Like, what got you to get your name out there?
So I did, when I was doing a Magician Apprentice, that was really not, I mean, I think I did my best on it, and I think it looks pretty decent. But it was a sword and sorcery kind of book, and that's not my forte. And so when there was like a break in the scheduling on Magician Apprentice, and they gave me a Marvel Adventure Spider-Man issue, which is, it was the kids line of Spider-Man, and they gave me one issue, and I think I did okay. It was it's not good, but then I did a second issue, and I seemed to like let loose, and I was doing much better work. And so I think that my editor, Mark Panicia, saw like, wow, he really stepped up his game between two issues. That's kind of crazy. And then we went back and did more Magician Apprentice. And I feel like I really was like finding my groove. And then we finished Magician Apprentice, and they let me do a 3-issue run on Incredible Hercules, which was in the main Marvel universe. It wasn't, a pocket universe like Marvel Adventure series. It was the real deal. And I started to get these reactions from other people at Marvel where like Mark Panicia would say like, they're really talking about your stuff up here. Like, they're really into it. And it was from there that I just kept I did She-Hulk backup stories in Incredible Hulk, and then that led to a Sif one-shot, which is when after the Sif one-shot, I kind of was like, hey guys, how about a raise? And they didn't reply for a while, and I was a little bit nervous about it. And then I went to C2E2, which was a comic convention in Chicago, and the big bosses came up to my table, and they were talking to me, and I was, crapping my pants. And all of a sudden they were like, yeah, so we want to offer you an exclusive contract. And my head about exploded. Well, they didn't even say exclusive contract. They said, we want to offer you a contract, and, you'd be working for us and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Because, I'd always dreamed of getting an exclusive contract or whatever. And then I went I'm good friends with Scotty Young. And after they came up to my table, I went up to Scotty and I was like, hey, yeah, they want to give me this contract and all this stuff. And he goes, that's an exclusive contract. And I was like, no, that's not what that is, because you just hear that word and you think, oh, well, I've hit the big time. And he's like, yeah, no, that's exactly what they're doing. And so, yeah, it was pretty mind blowing. But I think that when I did the Sif one, when I did the She-Hulk and the Incredible Hercules and the Sif one shot, they really liked what I was doing. And then they from that point on, I've been under contract with Marvel.
That's really awesome. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start taking some questions from the chat. So the first question comes from Comics with Bueller, and he wants to know, as an artist, do you ever struggle with translating a writer's story into artwork?
I mean, of course, there's struggles all the time. There are writers who are very visual in how they think, and those ones are super easy to work with. And there's like you get on a wavelength with them. Like Donny and I we completely understand what each other wants to do all the time. I don't know how it works, but we have like a mind meld. But there are other writers who definitely are thinking more in terms of, I don't know. It's not like it's wrong, but it just doesn't work with the way that I think as much, and that can be challenging. What they think is cool visually is not what I would think was cool visually. Like if a writer wants somebody to do, if they're like, here's 1,000 characters doing something cool, I'm like, that's not going to look as cool as 2 characters punching each other. Like that's better. So for sure, I'll struggle with that. But for the most part, the writers that I've worked with have all been very open to collaborating. So if I do have a real problem or a real issue with how to draw something, I'll just get on the phone with them. It's like the first issue of Venom with me and Donny, where he had written this scene where where Venom stops the truck, and he wanted Venom to turn invisible and have Eddie inside the invisible thing and all this stuff. And I was like, Donny, it'll just look cooler if it's just Venom in his costume smashing the truck. And he's kind of like, yeah, you're right. So we did that, and that's one of my favorite pages I've ever done. So
cool. So my next question, I was watching when you went on with Joe Quesada, the morning warm-up. He said that you were born to draw Venom. What are your thoughts on that?
He's probably right. There's something. It was definitely something that I didn't know I was that I would be good at. Because I mean, I am a Venom fan, but I'm a Spider-Man fan. So Venom's kind of a bit of a villain in my eyes. But what we've done with him has been kind of make him more of a hero, which I think is really cool. But so I started drawing him just kind of, Venom's a neat character. We'll see where this goes. And as soon as I started drawing him, because I did that Venom Inc. book, and I drew Venom a couple times in there, and I was just like, oh, I love drawing this character. It's the same, it happens every once in a while. You have the Inhuman books behind you. Similar thing happened with Medusa, where I was like, I didn't know that I was going to love drawing Medusa, but that's like one of my favorite characters I've ever drawn now, just because. But there's definitely something, a through line, because I like my stuff is like hyperkinetic, and I like to find a way to make a character moving. And Medusa has that long hair, Venom has his tendrils, Spider-Man has his webs. So but I feel like my life's work is this Venom series. So
The cool comic guy wants to know if Thor God of Thunder issue number 6 or Venom number 3 is the first appearance of Null. What does he think since he did the Venom 3 cover?
I don't know.
Okay.
Venom 3. That's I can't even remember what was in Venom 3, and I don't know what that Null was in. Oh. Was he in the scene? He's talking about the scene that Butch Geist drew. Yeah, I don't have an answer. That's above my pay grade.
All right, sorry, comic guy. But Comic Books NYC wants to know: is there a character you haven't had the chance to draw or publish that you'd like to? And do you prefer the Spider-Man movies or the Venom movie?
First question. There's this one character. He's kind of like a D-lister, and not many people know about him. But I'd like to draw Batman someday.
Cool.
I just realized recently too that I haven't drawn an interior page with Daredevil, so that's going to have to happen at some point. And as for the Venom movies versus the Spider-Man movies, I mean, I didn't really love the Venom movie, and I do love the very first Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, and I love Spider-Man 2, and I like the Tom Holland Spider-Mans a lot. So I'm going to have to go with Spider-Man on that. I think that there's potential for a really good... I mean, Tom Hardy's my favorite actor
Yeah.
And so I thought Venom with Tom Hardy would be my favorite movie ever, but didn't quite hit the mark for me.
You said that you wanted to do some work on Daredevil, and I know our good friend Everything Comics is a huge Daredevil fan, and he is probably freaking out right now because he loves everything Daredevil. But going back to that same episode with Joe Quesada, you said that you're doing a lot of 2-page spreads for Venom. Do you like doing those, and how long do they usually take?
I do like doing them because I like anything that can be bombastic and in your face, and that I like a 2-page spread I don't like a 2-page spread where there's a million panels. I like a 2-page spread where there's 4 or 5 panels and you get this one really big image. So they really overall they take about the same as it would take me to draw 2 pages regularly. It may look like more work, but really I'm only solving one major composition, so that kind of evens out what takes a long time in the back end, which is rendering a whole thing out. I've got one 2-page spread over here on the table behind me. Again, can't talk about it or show it, but I have looked at that a few times and I've been skipping over it because I'm like, that's just gonna kill me having to finish that thing. But when it's done, it'll be awesome. So I really enjoy it, especially the ones that Donny writes, because like I said, he's so visual and we have such a mind meld that it's always something that I want to draw.
Yeah, I really like taking the time just to look at everything you do in it, and I think they're really awesome.
Thank you.
Dylan's Comics just came in. He's one of the main guys that got us to this point today, and he sent us a question that he wanted us to ask. So the question is, what is it like revamping the Venom character? You and Donny have put a spin on the Venom story unlike any other. What was the process of making this Venom series your own?
Well, so I came into the series when Donny had already written the first issue and had a full plan for what he wanted to do. So I didn't have a lot to say at the beginning. We did come around on what we wanted his look to be. We definitely wanted to make him more human look. When he's in the costume, we didn't want to make him a monster anymore. He has the monstrous face, but we tried to change him to a more, you still wanted him to. We didn't always want him to seem like a complete monster. We wanted to make sure that you knew that there was a human being inside the costume. So stuff like that we worked on, and now we kind of, after that first arc, which he kind of already had mapped out, we definitely talk these things out. I go to the summits with him. We talk to the editors about what we're going to do. We just did one this week where we ran them through some things that we're going to be doing, and it was really neat. It's kind of, this is the most involved in the process I've ever been. So like I'm constantly sending Donny ideas and he's adding them to the scripts. I wrote the Venom Unleashed tie-in, which was really cool because I just kind of put some ideas in there that I didn't expect Donny to use any of them. I was just trying to come up with a cool story for that issue. And then Donny actually just grabbed onto some of the stuff that I used, and it's canon now. It's in the other books, and like those spires that we used in Absolute Carnage, stuff like that. Really neat.
Cool. So going back to that Daredevil spot, the Immortal Biggie Shack wants to know if Chip would let you work on it.
Chip, listen, if I want to work on it, I will get Chip fired. I'll call Joe Quesada direct.
Comics with Beeler wants to know if you put Easter eggs in your arc, like references to friends or others.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to my family. So this is kind of cool. I've told this story on other things before, but it's a new show. So in my very first issue of Amazing Spider-Man that I drew, the only one that I actually drew that's called Amazing Spider-Man because I did Superior Spider-Man, it was like issue 665, and in that I have Spider-Man perched on top of a hotel. It didn't say which hotel. Dan Slott had just written on top of this hotel, so I drew him on top of a neon sign, and the neon sign said Ellie Jude Motel or Hotel. Just Ellie is my niece. Jude is my nephew. At the time, we had no. Those were my only. They were babies, and those were my only nieces and nephews. Now I have a bunch of them, but so it said Ellie Jude Motel, and then in the Spider-Man video game, the most recent one, they have a cutscene where a helicopter smashes through the Ellie Jude Hotel sign.
Oh, cool.
So they used it in that game. It's just the name of my niece and nephew is now in that video game. So they got the game too, so they could see the sign.
That's awesome.
And then also in that issue, there's graffiti on the wall, and it says Oliver 2/17/11, which was the birth date of my first son. Who so stuff like that I'll throw in here and there for sure.
Awesome. What do you find more challenging, working on covers or interior artwork?
They both have their own challenges. It's definitely so a cover is more challenging for layout purposes because you have to nail the composition. So I have a cover over here that I've been working on, chipping away at this week, and the composition alone took me like 4 or 5 hours, which is just outrageous. Just like me fixing and tweaking and moving things around until I liked the way that it looked. But really they're both, once the composition is settled and that part looks good, they're equally, I can get both of them done in the same amount of time.
Now, when you're doing interior artwork, do you focus on one panel or do you focus on the whole entire page?
I'll lay out the entire page, and then I sort of work from upper right to lower left because I'm left-handed and I don't want to smudge everything. So, whatever the upper right panel is, that's the first one I work on. If that goes across the whole top, then that one gets done, and then I move down.
Cool. Who are your influences and what makes them the people you look up to?
I like to describe it as I like comic book art that is cartoony with a realistic rendering. So, there's so many guys like that, Todd Mcfarlane, Arthur Adams, Michael Golden, Joe Madureira, J. Scott Campbell, Jim Lee, all these types of guys. Greg Capullo, obviously. So those guys are all major influences on me. I'm looking around. I got David Finch stuff on my wall. Mark Silvestri. I have a Mike Zeck piece up here on the wall. So basically, you can kind of pinpoint. If you see something that is cartoony with realistic rendering, you can rest assured that I'm going to like it. Like Todd McFarlane's probably the biggest influence on me ever. I think that because he was the guy that got me into comic books and made me want to be a comic book artist. And then my favorite probably artist of all time is Michael Golden.
Cool. Wasn't your sister a big influence to you as well?
Yeah, my sister was really into drawing when I was younger, and so I often think that part of why I got into drawing was because I wanted to impress my older sister. She's 2 years older than me, so that was kind of like I was kind of like a nuisance to her. So it was a way to get attention. So she was an art teacher for a while too, and so she went to college for art. Now she's a counselor, but we drew all the time as kids. I mean, it was absurd.
What does she think of what you're doing now?
She thinks it's cool. I mean, like Ellie and Jude, the ones I was talking about, those are her kids. I've gone into her school that she works at, and I designed their cover for their yearbook, stuff like that. So, I think that she thinks it's cool, and she's proud.
That's awesome. When you were drawing, do you picture the whole world inside your head?
This is I get asked this a lot, and I know it's really a strange phenomenon because I know that I'm seeing stuff in my head, but I don't know how much I'm seeing. I just know that I'm seeing flashes of things. It's almost like feelings and I can feel textures. I can feel the emotion of the scene. And I just basically, when I start drawing something, there's all these elements in my head and I don't know which is in charge or what's really happening, but I know that I got to get it down as fast as I can because there's definitely a point where it's all there.
Cool. Chaos and Comics wants to know, how did your unique Carnage design come about in Absolute Carnage?
We were doing the Absolute Carnage Summit in New York. We were at Marvel's offices, and we were talking through the story. And oftentimes when we're talking through the story, that's sort of Donnie's show, and I'm just chiming in here and there. And so while he's talking, I just get to sketching in the sketchbook, and I did some drawings. And I think at first I did one that we kind of scrapped where he didn't have the exposed spine. And then I did another one, which, we auctioned off actually for comic book stores. And somewhere along the line, I don't even really know, we were like, what if his spine was exposed? And we were like, would that look silly? And I drew it and it didn't look silly to us. So we went with it. We also started, his face was going to be a spiral with no eyes. And one of the editors kept saying, I think you need the eyes. And we were kind of fighting him. And then I was like, all right, fine, I'll try it. And then we saw it and we were like, yeah, that's better. So
as you can see, I'm a huge Venom fan. And
I have that same shirt, by the way.
Oh, cool. But Absolute Carnage is what made me like Carnage so much nowadays, because I think he's an awesome character and I think he's really cool.
Thank you.
The current Venom series as well. But what does it feel like to work on these awesome characters that have millions read it?
It's pretty unbelievable, honestly, that there's times where it's hard to fathom that it actually worked out the way that it did. Like my goal when I got into all this was to do stuff, exactly the stuff that I'm doing. So it's also hard to understand how many people are reading it. The only way that you get really a sense of that is when you go to a convention and there's a seemingly endless stream of people who are getting the same, Absolute Carnage number one signed. But yeah, like it feels great to have actually gotten there. And then there's things that I want to accomplish beyond it. So, I keep moving the goalposts on what my goals are. But yeah, I mean, if I can get in the right headspace and really comprehend it, it's pretty awesome.
Nice. We have a question coming in from Eric, and he wants to know, what are your favorite non-Marvel comics, even though he buys the most Marvel comics?
I mean, I love a lot of old Vertigo stuff, Sandman, Preacher, all that stuff, and I love a lot of Image stuff. So like Saga is one of my favorites. I'm never prepared to answer this. I love manga. I've read a lot of, Akira is one of my all-time favorite series. Blade of the Immortal, stuff like that. And I have always loved Batman.
I know you're huge into manga, and I was watching a live stream, and you were talking about how you recommend Chainsaw Man to all kids under 10 years old.
That was a little bit of an oversight on my part. I let my son read that, only later to find out what was occurring in that book. That was, not my proudest moment, but he's already read it, so I can't take it away. I can't take it back.
Now, for the people that are unfamiliar, do you want to tell everyone what his goal is?
I mean, obviously his goal is to touch boobs.
There you go, everyone.
I mean, as it should be, I guess. I don't know.
We have another question coming in from Comics with Bueller, and he wants to know, what are your thoughts on how to get more young people like Will into comics?
I think that what you're doing here is exactly how. That's kind of why we wanted to start a YouTube and podcasting. I want to find ways to reach outside of, I mean, it's for people who already enjoy what we do, but I would love to find a direct line to people outside of that normally read us. And so I think that stuff like what you're doing, you're gonna, hopefully somebody stumbles upon your show and they're like, hey, that does sound like a cool hobby. Maybe I'll give it a shot. Getting online and doing stuff like this, though, I feel like is the way, because I kind of think I see it with my kids, how they love these Japanese comic books, but they kind of are turned off by American comics. I don't know. I think that that's just because that manga is what they got into first. But I do think that a lot of American comics are a little too adult, because they're made mostly for adults now. And I think that that's because those are the people that buy comic books. It's like we're making things for the people that buy them. But I'd like to find a way to go outside of the current status quo, because I'd like to find a way to make books that have more of a teenage tone and attract that market.
How do you like working on some covers for Thor? Like, I picked this one up that I really like, Thor issue number 4. I really like that one. But what's it like working on some Thor covers?
Well, I love Thor, and Thor was for a long time one of my answers when you would say, well, it's pretty much my only Marvel answer when you would say, what Marvel characters have you not worked on that you would like to? And I feel like at this point I can just kind of, I'll dip in and do some covers on Thor, but Donnie's writing Thor right now and it's so good, and Nick Klein's doing like the best work ever. And so, in a perfect world, Donnie would have waited till I was done with Venom and then I would have done Thor with him. But since he's already doing it, I kind of am just like, well, I'll let that one go and move on to other big dreams.
House Till the End wants to know if you have any plans to do your own independent project.
Yes, that's part of. If I can plug my my YouTube show, go to youtube.com/StegmanR, smash that like button, subscribe. Donnie and I are creating a creator-owned book on there live. We're showing people the creative process. It's called,
by the way.
What's that?
Awesome job.
Thank you. It's called Bad Kids right now. We're gonna change the name. We don't, just whatever. But we're planning on. We've designed the characters. Next step would be we will find an artist, and Donnie and I are going to co-write it and create a new book, and I'll be doing covers for it. But we're not sure how we're going to release it yet. It might be Indiegogo, something like that. And then there's definitely plans. Donnie and I have another series that we've planned out behind the scenes that we would like to do creator-owned also. So, I mean, it's just a matter of time that happens also.
How demanding is it working for Marvel, and what happens when you're running late on a deadline?
It's pretty demanding. I mean, the speed at which we produce these things, I think sometimes we complain about it, but I also think that's sometimes how the magic happens with these things, where we just have to make new stuff all the time. So I feel like a long time in my career, I felt like I was working around the clock. I definitely have figured out how to balance my work and life a lot better now. So I do get days off like today. But when I'm behind on a deadline, basically I just stress out, have bad dreams, don't sleep well, and try to get things done. But I've never been the guy that stays up all night. I don't do all-nighters. At worst, I've had a couple projects where I've had to have somebody come in and do a couple pages. But lately I haven't been, having to do that. I'm pretty good at controlling my schedule. But yeah, it gets stressful, but it's a good kind of stress.
What music helps you get into the zone of drawing? And asking that question, what are some of the concerts you've been to?
I listen to a lot of, I like music with no words when I'm trying to like lay stuff out. So, I mean, I like, there's a band called Fortet. There's a band called, a guy called Fortet and Caribou, stuff like that. DJ Shadow, who's an oldie for me, but one of my favorites. So, but that's just specifically stuff that I listen to in order to get into a creative mindset. Also I listen to a lot of hip hop. I listen to a lot of like classic rock, stuff like that. Lots of indie rock. I don't know. I'm all over the map.
Yeah.
Concerts I've been to. My favorites, I saw Jay-Z and DMX and Method Man in Detroit one time. I saw
Nice.
Outkast in Grand Rapids. Outkast is one of my favorite all-time bands. I've seen the Beastie Boy. I mean, it goes on and on.
Nice. Do you ever get the impulse to take like long breaks from drawing?
No,
No,
not at all. No, I actually really don't like taking breaks because if I do, I feel like I come back and I'm rusty. I mean, I like to draw like if I'm not drawing for work, I like to draw for fun. So I think that sometimes drawing for fun can bring back your love of drawing for work. So it's almost like if you don't draw, that's worse than just you should draw for fun if you're feeling burnt out.
Nice. We have a question from 36 Chambers. His question is, what drove you to comic book art, and do you like doing any other mediums as a break from comics?
Comic book art, definitely the energy and the creativity, because I wasn't, I've written a little bit here and I would like to write more, but I've kind of found my soulmate writing wise with Donny. So I haven't been, and they won't let me write right now because Marvel wants me to write more stuff, but they won't let me while I'm doing these event type things because it just would take. They're afraid that I'll miss my deadlines then. So as somebody who loves to write and loves to draw, it was like a natural fit where I like to. So what I'm doing when I'm drawing is I'm telling a story. So that's kind of, a win-win for me. So as far as media, like drawing and anything else, I'll do some digital painting every once in a while, and I like to mess around with different things, but mostly, again, like the thing that I like to do is to tell stories with art, with drawing. So I'm pretty fulfilled when I'm doing that. Sometimes I will, I'll get the itch to paint, and then I start it, and I'm like, yeah, well, I enjoy doing this other thing better. So,
Man, I could sit here all day and talk with you, but I like to keep my interviews around an hour mark. I have a last question. That's a two-part question. First, Keanu Reeves hasn't been a part of your podcast yet, and what's that like? What's with that?
Yeah, well, he's dodging our phone calls. We call him every day.
Okay.
Maybe that's too much. No, I don't know. He someday when Donnie and I create something that Keanu Reeves wants to star in, we will have him on the show.
Nice. And second, after working on so many awesome comic books and with Donny Cates, what's your next big goal besides being filthy, stinking rich?
My next big goal is to start creating things that I own. So that's part of, again, like what we're doing on my YouTube channel, and then the creator owned. And I'd like to, there's so many things I want to do at Marvel, but I also want to do that. So once I start owning some stuff and making my own mark on comics with things that I create, that will be very fulfilling. So that's the next step.
Nice. Well, there you have it, everyone. I just interviewed Ryan Stegman. This was awesome. This is going to be a day to remember. I will never forget this moment. I could sit here all day, like I said, but Ryan, what do you have coming up in the next couple weeks or whatever you got coming up?
Well, I'm quarantined, so I'm going to be living the Groundhog Day life, doing the same thing every day, drawing all the time. I'm actually getting a lot done, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll be on YouTube. You guys can find me there. You can subscribe to the podcast also on iTunes and all that stuff.
Well, there you have it, everyone. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And as Ryan likes to say it, make sure to smash the like button. And with that being said, we'll catch you next time.